Welcome back, everyone, to our special coverage of the cult mom conspiracy trial of Lori Daybell. I'm Kelly Craft, coming to you live from Phoenix, Arizona. A jury in Arizona found Lori Daybell guilty of conspiring with her now deceased brother, Alex Cox, to kill her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. A jury of 10 men and 2 women found her guilty, and we have a juror that is joining us now live. This juror has just walked up from being downstairs to join us. We don't always get an opportunity to talk to jurors after a verdict in a case, so this is one of those rare opportunities. Hello, we are meeting for the first time. My name is Kelly Craft with Court TV. What's your name?
Tosh.
Tosh.
Yes.
I'll have you get a little closer to me, Tosh. Thank you so much for joining us, and moreover, thank you so much for serving on the jury. We appreciate your jury service. I'm a practicing attorney, and it's often hard to find people that want to serve on the jury, so I want to say thank you for serving on a jury.
Of course.
Okay, talk to me about the verdict and what went on inside, if you can.
Inside our jury room?
Yes.
A lot of back and forth. Most of us pretty much knew what we wanted to do, but there was a couple of us that still needed kind of more looking into, so we all did it as a whole to look more into it, just to put our minds at ease, and then we came up with it in not too long a time.
Take me back to the first moment when you walked in to begin those deliberations. So yesterday, did you deliberate and discuss at all? You were just in session for a very short amount of time.
We did not.
Okay.
We got sat back there, and then they told us that we'll be back tomorrow morning, so.
Okay. And then, so today, when you made your way back into the courtroom, what's the first thing? Did you take a vote? What took place?
A lot of eyes were on us. We got set back into that room, and then that's kind of where they told us now is the time that we can talk about it, we had all the evidence, so we could relook at it, we could watch everything, we could reread everything, and that's exactly what we did. So it took a little bit of time, but we did it.
When you talk about some people needed some convincing, what were some of the sticking points?
The text messages, the romantic messages that were between
Lori and Chet Daybell.
Correct. Just 3 days after. Yeah, so that was pretty crazy because that means that there was something before that. But and then when she was still talking to her brother, they said that she said that they were going to be like Nephi,
Yes.
and that Charles was Ned before they got rid of him.
Yes.
So the part where they said they got rid of him was kind of where we were all like, yeah, that makes sense.
For jurors, was it hard to understand and wrap your head around what was going on? While I was sitting inside the courtroom, I noticed there was one point during the trial that a lot of jurors were taking notes when the prosecutor was talking about Z's, zombies. When the jurors are starting to hear about all of these just different, maybe outside the box religious beliefs, what was going through your head?
It's a lot to take in. Coming from a small town, I've never heard of anything like that before. So that being, when they were talking about it, I think all of us were kind of like, we've never heard of that. So we started taking notes on what she was calling them so we could look back at the times, when, why, how, all that stuff.
Yeah. When Lori gave her opening statement, so back a few weeks ago now, she was emotional during that time.
She was.
You're hearing about a family tragedy. That's what she referred to this as. What did you think of that message? In the beginning. Let's talk about maybe in the beginning first.
When we heard it in the very beginning,
Yes.
I think a couple of us felt for her when she said that, because, I mean, it's not easy losing someone you've been with for so long, whether you don't like them or not. But then as time went on, it kind of got a little more real, and I'm not sure what I can say.
No, that's okay. And then at the end, I noticed during the closing argument, some of the jurors, I didn't notice you, but some of the jurors had their hands crossed during her closing argument, at least for some of it. And I felt, just from being a spectator in the gallery, that the opinion kind of has changed a bit, and maybe Lori's comments are not as believable maybe as they had been at the opening.
Yeah, that's right. Because we got shown a lot more stuff from the since the beginning. And so it all kind of came to a realization that it's actually a real thing that she did. And our emotions changed because at first, like I said, we were kind of feeling for her when she said it was a tragedy. But now that we've seen everything, we've touched everything, we've read everything, it's a lot. So we've been through a lot on this jury.
You definitely have. What about the prosecutor's point about Charles Vallow lying on the ground and that second shot? She spent a lot of time focusing on that second shot. Did that play a factor in your decision?
It did, because what she was what she was basically saying was that it was self-defense. One shot, yeah, probably maybe self-defense. But the second shot, realizing that he got shot the second time when he was already on the ground, that's not self-defense. No matter what anyone says, it's just not. They can't do anything when they're on the ground. So that's when we were like, yeah, they're right about that. So
another thing the prosecutor talked about is the money. How did that play? Now, Lori said in her opening that it is not a crime to have life insurance policies on somebody, that her husband had a $2 million life insurance policy on her. How did that play?
It kind of stayed in all of our minds from the beginning because it is a lot of money, even though hers is more. $1 million is still a lot of money. And I don't know if you guys saw the texts or heard them, but she was pretty upset when she realized she was not the beneficiary. And then when they talked about it in person, she just kind of rolled her eyes and scuffled at us. So, yeah, she kind of played it as like we should be on her side, but we weren't, because, I mean, seeing the text messages that she was upset, even though she said she wasn't, and that, yeah, it's a lot.
What about the text message that we got rid of him, before we got rid of him?
Yes. That's when it kind of clicked to all of us.
Really?
Everything leading up to that was just more back of what we were already thinking when they did end up saying that.
I know your ride is here. I appreciate you talking.
Thank you so much.
You want to say?
I'm glad that his family is at peace. We got to see his sister's face and family's face when they said guilty, and they all just looked so relieved. It was a good feeling.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Tosh. Appreciate you talking to us. Have a good night. So we heard from a jury here. Again, that's a rare opportunity to hear what a juror has to say in a case like this, and she is exactly right. Justice for the victims' families, and that's why Arizona said they wanted to bring Lori Daybell here. They brought her here from Idaho, where she is serving a life sentence for the killing of her two children, Tylee Ryan, as well as JJ, and then also Tammy Daybell, Chad Daybell's wife. Oh, goodness. Okay, I think somebody just had an accident. So we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back with more from Court TV Live. We'll be back.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, Karen Reed stands trial once again for the murder of her boyfriend. We're unpacking today's opening statements as this massive retrial gets underway.
Closing Arguments coming up next, only on Court TV. Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
State of Arizona versus Lori Daybell, CR 2021-001704-001, verdict count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant, Lori Daybell, as to the crime of count 1, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, occurring on or about July 11, 2019, guilty.
We're back now live from Phoenix, Arizona, where our coverage in the verdict in the cult mom conspiracy trial of Lori Daybell is continuing. We did just talk with a juror who said that one big thing for them in making their decision was those text messages. So really interesting to hear the juror's perspective as to what exactly took place in this case. She also talked about that second shot. The prosecutor talked a lot about that second shot in which Charles Vallow, according to their theory of the case, was already lying on the floor, saying that was not self-defense. The juror we just spoke with as well said that did impact their decision. Here with us now to discuss more of this case, Lori Vallow Daybell's cousin, Megan Connor, is with us, joining us via phone. Megan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yes, thanks for having me again.
I know you have been in the courtroom throughout this case. What is your reaction to the verdict, Megan?
Well, I'm definitely grateful. More than anything else, I'm grateful to the jury, and I'm very happy that justice is finally served for Charles, and I'm thinking of Colby and the Vallow family today, and just really grateful that justice is served.
In listening to Lori when she gave her opening statement as well as her closing, and also was doing the cross-examination of all the witnesses, what were you thinking as you were sitting inside? I know that we have talked before outside the courtroom, and it comes across to people who really don't know Lori as maybe just her head is in the clouds, and she may not even, be realizing exactly what's taking place. And then it seems to be there's this belief, according to some, that she really is extremely manipulative. That's just the way that she comes across. What do you think? Well, what did you think as you were watching?
Well, it's infuriating to see Lori in the courtroom looking as though she has not a care in the world, flipping her hair, smiling at people, happy with her street clothes, knowing what she's done, what she's been convicted of. And there seems to be absolutely zero recognition from her of any sort of remorse whatsoever, or any recognition about what she's done to her victims. And that's infuriating to me. So I'm sure that, she's annoying. She comes off as arrogant and smug. And I know to a lot of people her voice is triggering, especially, Kay just talked in the press conference about her baby voice. And of course, that's, annoying to everyone. To me, it feels a little bit like vindication, because when I first started speaking up as a family member, this is what I said at the beginning during her first trial, that she has one persona in public and she is quite another thing in private. And I think we've seen that play out in the courtroom, and we've learned, the public has learned at this point, how manipulative Lori is, and how she doesn't really care about anything but what she wants, and that's her only goal.
Megan, you mentioned something that Kay Woodcock had said during the interview about the baby voice that is very noticeable when you're sitting inside the courtroom listening to her speak. Is that a different voice when she's before this? What was her voice like before all of this?
Well, the baby voice is just something that is part of Lori's manipulation tactic. She doesn't want to be perceived as harsh. She wants to be perceived as nice and sweet and kind. And she uses that baby voice. You'll notice that she uses it at the end of her cross-examination, or when the judge asks her a question, she'll say, "No more questions, thank you." So she uses that as a softener to whatever it is that she has said just previously that is manipulative and unkind.
Megan, it took the jurors just under 3 hours to make a decision. What was going through your mind as they were deliberating? Was there ever a doubt that they would come back with the verdict that they did, finding her guilty?
Well, I have to admit, I was hoping that they would come back pretty quickly this morning. And so when it stretched into a lunch break, I started to get a little bit worried, because I know that the evidence is very circumstantial. And, it's hard to know just by looking at their faces what they're thinking. I could tell that they were all very invested in learning the facts of the case, but it's really hard to tell how they're being affected. And so I was concerned when it stretched into a lunch hour. And as we got to the end of the day and it looked like they were going to go home for the day, I started to get really, really worried. So I was elated to hear that the verdict came back. And once I heard that, I was a lot less concerned, although it's always going to be a little bit nerve-wracking. You know, I was definitely holding my breath up until the moment that I heard the word guilty.
Megan, throughout this trial, I believe there were some new things that some family members did become aware of. One of those things was that Charles Vallow had been dating. Was that something that came as a surprise to you?
I knew through talking with other family members that he was moving on, and I knew that he had, you know, filed divorce papers earlier in 2019, and so, you know, I knew that obviously their marriage was having difficulties. So it wasn't really a shock to me that he was, you know, that he was making dates with other women. And I think as we heard Nancy Jo Hancock testify, you know, it was just dinner. They were meeting. They'd been talking. It's not like they'd had this long-standing relationship that Lori wanted to allege that Charles was having an affair when it was actually her who was doing that.
Yes, that was tough for many people to reconcile that in her comments inside the courtroom. Megan, thank you so much for your insight and your thoughts on this case.